Mr. Campbell.
I thank you very much. You know, in politics these days, we want to do everything in sound bites, and we want to come up with a solution for every problem. This issue, income inequality, mobility limitation, joblessness, whatever thing you want to deal with, is extremely complex and multifaceted and international, as many of you have mentioned. It doesn't lend itself well to that, and I think we do it a disservice when we do that, or do the problem a disservice when we try to say it can be solved with a single thing or a single solution. I also think we do it a disservice if we use it to further divide America. If people bring it up and try and say that it is somebody against somebody else, whenever that is used, it not only does a disservice to the country, but does a disservice to solving the issue. The third problem I think we have with this, which I'm hearing on this panel, frankly, not there, here, well, to some degree there, is if we use this issue to simply justify the policies that one party or the other have advocated for decades, we're not being serious, and we're also not looking for a real solution. We are simply using the issue to justify the things we already believe, and that perhaps the other side doesn't believe. So I think when we do any of those things, we are being counterproductive towards, and I think the issue is too important. I think it is too significant to trivialize it and reduce it in that manner. Now, that being said, in the 5 minutes of this soundbite, I can't engage in in a thorough discussion, but I will say I heard some interesting things that we haven't discussed much. Secretary Rice, you mentioned about vocational and technical trade and educational conceit. I don't think that's necessarily something where either party has staked out ground where they can't move. Dr. Kearney, you mentioned about devolution of the family and social issues. Those are difficult, I understand. They're emotional, they involve other things, but they can't be ignored. And one way or the other, people need to discuss it. One thing I wanted to bring up is whether, you know, when I spent much more of my life in the private sector than in public, and I never worried about how much somebody else made as long as I was making what I felt I ought to earn. When you look at the top incomes these days, and I'm not going to go into either business people or into entertainment because that politicizes it. So I always like to bring up sports because that tends to depoliticize the thing. And if you look at any major sport today, the players in those sports make way, way more money, adjusted for inflation and anything else, than they did in the 60s and prior. And you talk to people who were huge names at those eras, and they'll say, well, you know, I got out just before the really big salaries came up and the really big income. That, by the way, will apply to team owners as well in some of what they do and what these teams are worth. Why is that? Dr. Kearney,
Sure.
Anybody?
No, thank you for your serious attention to this very difficult and nuanced problem. I think a focus on the top 1% and why those folks have, you know, such enormous wages and incomes it's a fascinating question. In some senses, it's an academic question. Why has it become okay in a question of norms for a CEO to make so much more?
Keep it to sports, please.
Right. So the sports. Now we have a global television market. The revenues to these sports franchises are larger, and so some would argue that they're earning it because of the value brought into the sports team and the TV licenses, et cetera. But I do want to say, this, I think, distracts us from the real policy question. Those are fun questions to talk about, right? But the bigger issue, and the one that we need to do something about, is the inequality between people. College workers make twice as much as those with a high school degree. We could do something about that.
So is what you're saying is we should ignore that? Well, unfortunately, this thing is focused. A lot of people focus on those, on the picture
it's so
gets the $240 million.
It's huge,
but it distracts from the real issue, does it not?
I would tend to agree.
Okay, my time's up. Thank you.